Good. Everybody seated? Yes. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to talk or to listen to me basically today. You must be extremely tired. I know it's difficult, but hopefully I will be able to tell you an interesting story about conflicts of interest. And hopefully you will pay some attention and not too much attention to your mobile devices. So put them away for a moment, because I'm also usually very interactive. So I'm going to ask you questions in between. And if you don't pay attention, you don't know what to answer. So is that clear? Yeah? Okay. Are we all ready to go? Yeah? Cool. I'm also going to stay here because I want to be close to you. I think that's a little bit distant. Is that okay for you? Yeah? Cool. Well, I've been introduced. I'm working for an organization which is called RICS. And by the way, if I talk too fast, let me know, because sometimes I get overexcited and I want to speak too fast, but let me know, I will slow down. I was talking too fast, who said that? You. Okay, I'm working for an organization which is called RICS, and what we try to achieve is basically on a global scale to make the world of real estate more ethical, professional and transparent. And like the introduction said, I'm responsible for Europe, Russia and CIS. So the topic of today is very close to my heart. Because it's something I talk about on a daily basis. And as you may or may not know, the property sector, the real estate sector worldwide, is not a very positive sector. It has a bad image and there's a lot of corruption going on, and therefore conflicts of interest occur on a daily basis. So again, thank you for having me here today and to talk about this topic. Also, teaching is something I really like. I like to engage with students, and in particular when those students are the potential leaders of the future. Because you're here at the summer school and not for nothing. You're special to a certain extent, and therefore I'm excited to talk to you today about this topic. And hopefully we'll get some good interaction as well. And certainly, of course, being in Kazan, I've never been here, but it's a very old city with a long history, but also with a fantastic future. And from that perspective as well, I'm very grateful to be here today. The topics that we are going to discuss today is first of all ethics. And you can write thousands of books of ethics, or you can read them basically. But I will try to say in 2 slides what it is all about. And then we are going to talk about identity. And yes, Joseph, my neighbor next door, he talked about this already at the opening ceremony, but I will talk about it as well today. And then I will continue with dilemmas. And fourthly, I will end with the topic, the real topic of today, conflicts of interest. Are there any questions until now? All clear? Yes? If I talk about ethics, what does that mean to you? Who wants to say something about that? What's ethics? Do you know? Maybe? You want to say something? Oh, first you. It's about nationalities, religions. It has to do with morality. Sorry? Well, true. That's about ethics as well. Exactly. It's about good and bad, indeed. But everything you touched upon has to do with ethics. And that's why it's such a complex topic, although in its essence, it's very, very simple. So let's see, what did I write about it? Oh, first this one. Because you might say, what does this all have to do with each other? But identity is important because in the end, your identity determines your ethical behavior. And your ethical behavior then decides or determines basically how you deal with dilemmas. And lastly, talking about dilemmas, that's how you deal with conflicts of interest in the end. So therefore, it's important to bear this in mind, to see the connections between the 4 of them. But first, talking about ethics. Somebody said it already. Ethics is about wrong and right. It is about how you deal as a person with moral dilemmas. And when you talk about ethics and moral dilemmas, you also talk about values. But values are usually pretty vague. And you can't really make them concrete. It's not something tangible. It's about respect, openness, honor, that sort of thing. You can't really touch it. But norms, they tie in with values and with ethics, is something we jointly agree upon. And you have formal rules of engagement, like for example the law, but you also have informal rules of engagement. For example, in a company, the dress code or the hierarchy in the organization. So these three things are important when it comes to ethics, and they basically form the basis. And to clarify that a little bit more, the supermarket. The values say you have to be honest. But then again, what's honesty? The norm says you are not allowed to steal. So your behavior makes that you pay for the things that you buy. Do we understand that? And maybe it's very simple, but if you get this, well, we are already pretty far. Now over to identity. And again, Joseph, my neighbor, he talked already about this, but this is something about me. And it's not similar basically for everybody, but in essence, I think this counts for all of us. Your identity is basically being formed, the foundations are being laid by three things. Your upbringing, how have you been grown up? Your education by your parents. Education, what are kind of schools, universities did you follow? And thirdly, the friends that you've made over time. Because they have a very big impact on your character. And I can tell you, for me, personally, they did indeed. But it's a little bit more complex than that. And I try to work it out in a little scheme. Because I think it's important to get this right. Also for societies, for governments to think about this. Because, again, it all starts with the upbringing. You are being raised by your parents in a certain environment, and that needs to be right. It has a big impact when you're young, because then the engagement is basically only with your parents. And it reduces over time until, let's say, you're 18. And there will always be a level of engagement with your parents when it comes to your identity. Education, in my case, started when I was around 4 years old. And it had an increasing importance for me for who I am today. And of course, the third factor, I started real friendships, let's say at the age of 7. And you can see the red dotted line at the age of 18. I can say, in my case, at that moment in time, I think my identity, to a certain extent, was complete. At least, the foundations were laid. This is who I am, who I want to be. And of course, over time, there are factors that you have to take into account that change your identity a little bit. And Joseph, he talked about labeling. I would like to call it experiences and discoveries. You are going to work. You get other friends, you get families, maybe you get ill. And all those things, they have an impact on who you are. But again, if everything goes well, the foundations are being laid in the first 18 years of your life. And of course, I don't take into account traumatic experiences that can happen as well, that can change your identity completely. But if you're happy and you're in a good position, this is the way it should be. And again, why is this important? Because your identity determines your ethical behavior. But before I touch upon this, I would like to talk about corporate identity as well. Because it's not just a person. An organization can have an identity too. And then, as an organization, you all share the same values and norms. And we are being sponsored today by Coca-Cola. You've heard the success story of Coca-Cola. That's a very strong brand. And they can only be a very strong brand if the people that work for Coca-Cola are more or less the same, or at least believe in the same values and norms. Did you recognize that in the story yesterday or not? Yes? Yeah? How? Can you give an example? What did they show? Do you want to say? Not? No? Somebody else? Want to say something about the video? Or the lady or the man who talked about it? No? Okay. But it's a very strong brand. And they're successful because the people working for Coca-Cola, they're the same, they have the similar values, and they have the similar norms. And it's important because it helps the organization and it guides in the day-to-day work. It determines the communication. It says something about power in the organization. And it also says how the organization would like to engage with the outside world. It's about the image that you want to create as a company. So if you take or look at the high-performing culture of organizations, this is what it is all about. You need to be clear about what you would like to achieve. It's about role modeling. And I just talked to somebody about Marriott. I've passed also in hotels. And I used to work for big change. And one of the people I really admired was the founder of Marriott Hotels. Why? Because this guy tries to travel and visit all his hotels every year. Not because he likes it, but because he wants to be a role model for the people that are working for him. He wants people to be proud of him. And that can only if he engages with them. If he sits in his headquarters in the US, people are not going to know him, maybe by a little video, but if they really engage with him, all of a sudden that changes things. So role modeling is very, very important. Achievability of goals. If you set unrealistic goals, people will be disappointed because they can't achieve what you ask them to do. So you have to think about it as an organization as well. Making profit, increasing your return is all fine and good, but people need to be able to do so. It's about commitment. Am I going to go for this company? Every day when I step out of my bed, am I happy to go to work? If that's the case, you're committed. You like the work that you do. You like the company that you work for. It's about transparency of behavior, openness, and enforcement of behavior as well. Because if there are people that are not committed, if there are people with not the same norms and values, you have to kick them out. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So, but if you talk about corporate culture, you have to also to make sure that it's enforced, or that people recognize it. And therefore, you have all sorts of things you can do. Ceremonies, for example. Storytelling. Looking at YouTube, there's many stories about organizations. They are proud of their organization. They would like to share that, and therefore they put it on the internet. Symbols. If you come in Central and Eastern European countries, many peoples have those pins on their jackets. Why? Because they are proud of the organization, the country that they work for. And they want to show it by using a pin, which is great. Specialized language, selection. If you're going to select people, make sure that they have the right or the same values and norms as you have. And of course, socialization. How do you make sure that people, when they are new in your company, that they are being welcomed and that they have the right induction program? And to show you basically how difficult it is to get the same values and norms, I would like to ask you to take, let's say, 1 or 2 minutes to look at those words and choose 3. Yeah? And if you've chosen 3, discuss with your neighbor sitting next to you how many of those 3 you have in common. Go ahead. Did you discuss already with your neighbor? No? Okay, do it. It shouldn't be too difficult. Hey. I don't see people talking. People should talk. By the level of noise, I guess that we're not ready yet. But we are going to stop again. Okay. Can we be silent? It's still not silent. It must be very important. Yes. Okay. Oh. I have not enough impact. Oh, yeah, we're almost there. Good. If I ask, if you talk to your neighbor, how many of you did have 3 the same values? You with your neighbor? Exactly the same? That is amazing. How come? Are you brother and sister? No? But how come? Okay. How many of you did have 2 of the same values? Oh, 2. And the majority of you had none of the same values? 1. 1? Okay, 1. Okay. But what does this exercise show you? People are different. And what does that mean? It's difficult to understand each other because you have different benchmarks, different reference to the things that you do on a daily basis. And in particular, when you are working in an international context. And can I ask people to be silent, please? And I will give you an example, because I think it's a very strong example that shows a lot. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, basically. But it's... No, I lost my question. Oh, but can you still hear me? Yeah. Okay, we continue just like that. It's fine. That was broken though. The example I'm going to give, is there an Italian in the room? No Italians? Okay, this is an academic example. It's true. An Italian guy drives his car. And while he's driving his car, he hits a dog. And the dog dies. The friend who sits next to him is later on being asked by the police, did he hit the dog? The same situation happens in the Netherlands. The friend drives the car, hits a dog, and then the police asks his friend, did he do it? The Dutch guy will say, yes, he did it. Do you think the Italian friend was wrong? Who says he was wrong? It's about truth. That's correct. But if you talk about values and norms, yeah, exactly. In Italy, people say, fuck the police. The friend is more important than the police. In the Netherlands, they say, well, we are respectful of the police, and we will tell the truth. Yeah, but this shows how difficult it is. Especially, and you are all people, and we discussed it this afternoon as well, who would like to work in an international context, you have to be very, very specific and clear about your values and norms. Otherwise, you will get into conflict with people. But you have to be clear, so you have to communicate and talk about this, and tell what you feel is important. Do you understand? Yes, cool. So that is what we did. And as a result of that, you have to have a very strong moral compass. Because in whatever occupation you will get into, you will always get into a situation of temptation. I've been working my whole life in real estate and hotel management. I've had many offers of bribes, other things that I had to do simply because people feel, well, I can make that offer to someone. I've never done it. But you have to be strong, because it would be nice if you're young and somebody says, I will give you 5,000 euros, just like that, if you do this for me. And that might look like something that is too bad, but it's the beginning of something. Eh? So your moral compass needs to be very, very strong. You need to be able to know exactly what you are going to do, what you like about yourself, what you don't like about yourself. And I have to disappoint you, there is no app on the internet or on your telephone that can help you with that. So it's really something of yourself and of your family and your friends, the people that you talk to. Yeah? How do people feel here? Because what's your average age? How old are you on average? 20? So you must have some sort of a moral compass. How do you feel about your moral compass? Is it good? Yours? Yeah? Why? Do you always do what you would like to do? You say no. You not always do what you want to do? Okay, yeah, you have your parents and sometimes you have to listen and you have to do things that you don't like to do. Me, I have a lot of struggle with myself because I'm somebody who likes to please. The reason why I started to work in hotels was because I love to serve people. I want to make people happy. But the thing is, as soon as I did this, I forgot a little bit who I was. I lost my own identity and to a certain extent also my moral compass. Now it's back again, so it's good. But it's not always easy to get it right. And like I said before, there is no app to help you out on this one. You have to do it yourself. And if you talk about the moral compass, it's also about integrity. And for the people that have studied Latin, integritas. Unaffected, not corrupt. It's about harmony, integrated with the environment. And it's about daring to pick up the glove, but by maintaining a clear conscience. So you have to be force, if that's needed, but in an honest and respectful way. And since you are all people that, well, maybe are going to manage people sometime in the future, I thought it was useful to share this slide with you as well. It's what I call the ethical diamond. And the top of the diamond is about behavior, or about control. And the bottom of the diamond is about behavior. And the three top triangles, it's about having a gentle hand. You have to be gentle with the people that you work with. You have to be protective of your team. You have to support them, help them, but also protect them against the outside world. But you also have to be strong if they don't do what you want them to do. You have to be able to be force as well. I break everything here. And on the other hand, the other part of the diamond, it's about being authentic. And that ties in again with your identity. If you're not authentic, you cannot be honest. You cannot be ethical. You have to be reliable. Do what you say you are going to do. If you make promise, you have to keep your promise. Don't shy away from it. And be constructive, helpful, facilitate, coach your people. And then you will be a very successful manager. And I'm not going to discuss this slide in detail, but since I think you will get the slides afterwards, those words relate 6 parts of the diamond. When they talk about being gentle, it's about trust, dedication, inspiration, and being a coach for your team. If I talk about strong, it's about managing incidents properly, or punishes people if needed. And if I talk about reliable, it's about being consistent, coherent, and consequent in the things that you do. Is this interesting? Yeah? Helpful as well? Good. And lastly, talking about all this and ethical dilemmas or moral dilemmas, how to deal with it, I've added this slide. It's about ethical decision making. And if there's one thing that I would like you to use going forward, it's this little slide. Write it down on a paper because it will help you a lot. If you come into a situation that you find difficult, you don't know really what to do, follow the steps on this slide. First of all, identify the problem. Why do I think this is difficult? Why do I have an issue with this? And then identify the potential issues. So why do I think it's difficult? What are the issues involved in all this? You have to think about relevant ethical guidelines, the law, all things that you have to take into account when you talk about this potential issue. And then, if you still don't know or you're still not certain, you have to talk to your people. Talk to people that you trust. Obtain consult. And then, if you've asked people for advice, you know what the law says, you know about the ethical rules, you can make your conclusion. But still, if you have your conclusion, there might be a downside to it. So you have to take that into account and try to think about things that can mitigate the downside of your solution. And then, of course, you have to execute. Do what you want to do, and later on evaluate the result. And I can tell you, and normally I would do an exercise on the basis of this list as well, but we don't have the time. But I can tell you, if you follow this little checklist, with things that you find hard to take a decision about, you will make better decisions. Yeah? Moral dilemmas are a balancing act between two alternatives. You have to choose. And, well, people, also the people looking at their telephones, this is interesting, because it's about you. But in this case about John and Jill. John and Jill are married. And I'm their friend. So I'm the friend of both John, but also of Jill. And at a certain night, I'm having a beer with John in the pub. And John says to me, Maarten, I'm still in love with Jill, but I'm also in love with somebody else. Oh. But I'm asking you, don't tell Jill. What am I going to do? Who can give me advice? What am I going to do? And what's the problem, by the way? What's the problem? Sorry? Well, yes, indeed. Yeah, exactly. That's a problem. What should I do? Me? Or John? No, not me. Sorry, go ahead. I fully agree. Yeah, that's true. But that's not one of the solutions. You can't do that. But the thing is, and that's what I want to show you, if you are loyal to John, that in principle is right, because he's your friend. Look at the Italian example. But you can also say, I want to be loyal to Jill, but then you will lose a friend. So you have a moral dilemma, not between wrong and right, because that's easy, but between two things that are in potential right. Do you get this or not? Sorry? Draw her a picture. I don't get what you're saying. Oh, so yeah, no, no. I think the solution that she proposed is the best one. Okay, what she said is basically say to John that he has to be honest with Jill, and otherwise, if he's not, that you are going to tell, maybe, yeah. But the fact is, and that's one step further. The fact is that me, being the friend of both John and Jill, am in a difficult position. Because both solutions are in theory right. Yeah? So, that's about moral dilemmas. And like I said, we've started with identity, identity makes your moral compass. That says something about your ethical behavior. And that's how also what says something about how you deal with moral dilemmas. And now conflicts of interest. And conflicts of interest are a specific sort of dilemma, so to speak. Can someone tell me the difference between conflicts of interest and conflicts, basically, or not? Because you're talking a lot about conflicts as well. Someone wants to say something about it? Yeah? Here we go. Okay, but I think what you said was basically spot on. Conflicts can be between two parties, and conflicts of interest is something you have to deal with yourself. That's why we're talking about identity, about ethical behavior. It's in first instance something that has to do with yourself. And it's not something new, because I made a little list of all the sayings that I could find on the internet about conflicts of interest, and some of them are already very old, and they're all basically cross-border, multinational. So this is a list I'm not going to read out, but I thought it is nice to add to the slides. But a conflict of interest is the responsibility to one party interferes with the responsibility to another party. Or in more detail, any situation in which an individual or corporation is in a position to exploit a professional or official capacity in some way for their personal or corporate benefit. So you benefit personally from the position that you are in. Can you give an example that you know about? Can someone give an example? We will touch upon them later on. But who wants to say something? No? Not yet? Okay. But if you talk about the conflict of interest, it sounds bad, but it's not always bad. And I can tell you, I've been many times in a conflict of interest. I can't always do something about it because it just happens. It's the situation. And as a result of that, you need to be honest and open and transparent about it. So many people are facing conflicts of interest. They can't always help it, they have to deal with it. But then it's about how do you deal with it. And I will give you two examples. I'm in real estate as well. And if I look at how business is being done in Spain or in Austria for that matter, people that are working in the brokerage firms, in Austria and in Spain, it's very common to both represent the seller and the buyer. In the Netherlands, in the UK, in many other countries, that's not allowed, simply because it creates a conflict of interest. But if I'm not going to act according to the rest of the people, I will put myself out of the market, and that's not what I want. So I have to accept the fact that I put myself into a situation of a conflict of interest. But having said that, that doesn't have to be a problem if I'm honest to the buyer and the seller and tell both parties what kind of deal I did with the other party. And if they both agree, it's fine, because then you're being transparent. So again, although a conflict of interest, I prefer that you avoid it, but sometimes you can't, and then you have to be honest and transparent about it. If you look at the types of conflict of interest, then basically the literature says there are three. And the first is public office. For example, I'm the managing director or I work for a construction firm. And in my free time, I'm also a member of the city council. And as a result of that, I know well in advance what kind of construction projects are going to take place. Or what kind of tenders are going to be coming to the market. So in other words, I have information that my competition doesn't have because I'm a member of the city council. And that's a real conflict of interest. And I can tell you, this one happens a lot. Not just in the Netherlands, but in many other countries as well. Because, well, the temptation is there. It's for the good of your company. And it helps to grow your company. So you might say, okay, it's not too bad that I use that information. Outside employment is more or less similar, but a little bit different because because you're working, for example, as a non-executive member of a board. So you work with a board, you know something about a takeover or whatever that could be of relevance for your organization. And you use that information for the benefit of your company. Or maybe for your personal benefit because you buy shares in a company. And lastly, and that's the one people know best, you favor your family. You help your son to a certain position, or your cousin, or you do something else that benefits yourself, because it's your family member, but also part of your family. And that's not correct because, well, that shouldn't be the criterion for you to choose of. Yeah. Yeah, because the level playing field is not equal. So you favor yourself over other parties. Yeah. But that I appreciate that. But the fact is that's where your moral compass comes into play. And we will talk about this. I will talk about the trust test later on. And then let's see what happens. Yeah? Clear? Forms of conflict of interest. You can have a real conflict of interest. It's actual. It can happen in the future, and then it's potential. And it can also be perceived. So people think that there is a conflict of interest. And you can say, okay, if it's perceived, that's not a problem. But it is. Because if people start to talk about it as if it is a potential conflict of interest, you have a problem too. So perceived conflict of interest, you need to equally manage as a real or a potential conflict of interest. Do we get that? It's very important, this one. And especially in the times of social media, where sources are not being checked and people share information very quickly, rumors can start to spread. So you have to be very, very careful with this, that your reputation is not being hurt. And then if you talk about interests, what is it all about? Most of the time it's about money. People are greedy. And therefore they are willing to do a lot of things. And I will talk more about this later on. Sometimes it's personal, or it's about property, possession, and about many, many other things. But the most important one is financial benefit. Well, we discussed this. When can potential conflicts of interest happen? If you are, working for a company and you have to carry out your duties and you have to deal with a relative or a close personal friend, an organization, club, society of which you are a member, your church leader, a person or an organization to which you have a legal obligation or a moral obligation, people that owe you money. Many examples where you can have conflicts of interest. And I can tell you, you will experience it many times over the years in your career. And then again, you have to think about how am I going to deal with this? And there's one, fraud, that I would like to discuss a little bit more in detail. Because what we just discussed, quite often this is about money. And conflicts of interest can easily lead to people committing fraud. And research shows, if you talk about fraud, that there's usually three things very important. First of all, the person that commits fraud is under pressure. And again, I will tell you from personal experience, in the Netherlands we had big property frauds in the past. And the guys that were involved, I know them well because I was part of the market. And the guy who committed the fraud, he was working for a pension fund. And he was dealing with project developers and agencies and people with shitloads of money and driving big cars. And this guy was so desperately in the need of having the same watch as the developer or the agent he was working with on a daily basis, that he committed fraud for a watch of 30,000 euros. Can you imagine? He wanted this watch because he wanted to be part of this other group, and therefore he committed fraud. And he was in a position to do it because he had the opportunity. He was buying real estate for his pension fund, properties worth 100 million euros, but the worth or the value of a property is not fixed. Because if one person says, well, it's 100 million euros, and I say it's 102 million euros, yeah, I might be right as well. And the thing is, 2 million euros, 100 million euros for a pension fund might not be a lot. But for the person who commits the fraud, 2 million is a lot of money. Yeah? And he justified it for himself. He said, listen, 100 million euros, I've made my targets for the objectives for the pension fund. Who cares about this 2 million? Because it's about billions in the pension fund. But it's not right. But this is how people start to commit fraud. So they have a potential, or they have a conflict of interest. They are greedy, or they are under pressure. And being under pressure, a lot of people these days get divorced. And they can't sell their house. They don't know how to solve it. And then they think, okay, I'm in a situation where I have the opportunity to do something and I can justify it for myself, and then it happens. And don't say, this will not happen to me, because you will never know. And then you have to have a strong moral compass. Experience shows that too many people walk into this trap. So be aware of this in many different situations. And that's why I'm highlighting this slide. But how can you prevent conflicts of interest from happening? First of all, I refer to the slide of decision making. What I said about the little checklist that you can use if you have a dilemma that you need to deal with for yourself. Second, what I said is basically talking about those agents' prior disclosure. If you feel that there is a potential conflict of interest, but you are in a situation, you can tell the people involved that you have an issue. And if you are transparent and honest, it's fine. And transparency is the next thing on the list. You have to be independent, and you can also have a code of conduct that says this is what you are allowed to do, this is not what you're allowed to do. I'm a member of my organization, RICS. I have to sign a code of conduct. And that code of conduct says that I'm not allowed to deal for both the seller and the buyer. And therefore, I commit to that, and if I don't do that, I can be punished. And now we get to the trust test. We were discussing, you said, well, what's the problem? Basically, with the guy in the municipality. The problem is, if you would ask your clients, your stakeholders, are you okay or in agreement with what I am now going to do, basically sharing information I get because I'm in the city council, and I'm going to use it for the benefit of my company, what do you think his stakeholders will say? They will not like it. I am sure. Who thinks people think like she feels, that they are okay with that? Oh, you're on your own. You think she's right? No. Yeah. But I can tell you, on the basis of, again, research, it's not okay. If you tell people, listen, I'm a member of the city council, and as a result of that, coincidentally, I get also more information than the market gets, and therefore I can basically influence the outcome of a tender, of which I'm part of. That's not fair. And therefore, if your stakeholders know about this, I think you will have a problem. Yeah? The trust test. If you have a conflict of interest, then you have to manage it. And basically there are 5 ways to do it. And they are not, well, the same, of course. First of all, you can say the person that's involved, we are going to restrict his work. So he cannot do everything that's related to this specific case. You can say we are going to recruit someone outside the organization that is going to solve this issue for us. Then you make someone independent, and that's what I said at the previous slide. You can say we are going to remove the person from the case, so he's not going to be involved at all. We can ask him, basically, to give up his interests in the case. So, for example, if someone gets a member of a board, then sometimes they are being asked to sell their shares in the company simply to make them independent. And people are sometimes willing to do so. Or you can ask people to leave the company because what they did or what they are about to do is so bad that that is a better solution. But of course, that's the solution you choose when nothing else works. So from that perspective, this is how you can manage an existing conflict of interest. And that basically brings me to the wrap up. We started to talk about ethics. 2 slides about ethics, which is not a lot, but you got the essence. It's about wrong and right. And ethics, ethical behavior is important. And the way you think about ethics is as a result of your personal identity. And to talk to you about the fact that I think that your personal identity is being made in the first 18, 20 years of your life. And primarily determined by your friendship, education, and the way you've been brought up. So it's very extremely important for people to take that into account. So upbringing, raising your children is a very, very important thing to do. And you need to pay a lot of attention to that. But also education is important. And friends, of course. Who are you dealing with? Who are your friends? Who do you like, who don't you like? And like I said before, I made some bad choices when it comes to friends. And I learned from it. And happily, I turned it right. So your identity is important. And it says something about how you are going to behave ethically. And the way you behave, your moral compass, says something about how you deal with moral dilemmas. Not about wrong and right, because that's easy, but about the dilemmas that are between good and good. And lastly, if you talk about conflicts of interest, and you will meet many in your career, there are some tools now that you can use to solve them. And of course, I know I can talk for hours about this, give you much more examples and exercises, but you're all tired, and maybe you want to go somewhere else. So it's now time for questions. Who wants to ask something? Go ahead. Again, you.
Okay, my name is Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
First, something that we all can elevate, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm not well by
Yeah. Well, I know what I would do. I would tell my friends. Yeah, but listen, this is a different level. Because it's also, to a certain extent, but maybe I'm saying completely the wrong things. But education is also a game. You're playing a game. They are trying to make it difficult for you. They challenge you. And you, by accident, found something out that is important that you want to share. You didn't do it on purpose. That's the most important thing. You passed by, not on purpose. You didn't sneak into the room. You started shuffling around. That's not what you did. You saw something by accident. And that's something else. Okay. Yeah. Hmm? 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 Yeah. Yeah. No, but that's different. Because this is you working in a private environment, dealing with private people. This is about public money, money from the government that is basically for everybody. That's a different thing. You know, this is how you do business and you make yourself successful. No, no, no. That's what it is. But that's the difference. It's about working for the public office and benefiting from that with your private firm. If you do business and you do business on the golf course and you get information like that, well, clever. You have business intelligence that someone else doesn't have. That's fine. Yeah? Other questions? Go ahead. Which slide? Oh. Jill. I think I go with your solution. You have to say to John, listen guy, you have to tell with Jill, because I can't accept it. It's not right what you do. You're my friend, and I lose the risk of losing you, but the fact is, I think it's worse that you cheated on her. Yeah, that's what I would do. Who else? Yeah, go ahead. Well, like I said, if you talk about ethical behavior, it's about identity of people. I think education and upbringing is very important when it comes to just this. So if your education or your upbringing is not right, it's very likely that you have a weak moral compass. So for me, your family, friends, your environment where you grow up, your education is very important. And if you don't get that right, you will always get a lousy society. Yeah? So that's where it starts. Yeah? Who else? Nothing? Oh, of course. We're still here. But you still have to do it. You will get used to it. If you train it, you will get used to it. And your intuition, we have lost to listen to our intuition. But quite often, your intuition is your moral compass. So if you feel, well, this is right, then most of the times it's right. If you feel it's wrong, most of the times it's wrong. Yeah? So try to trust on your intuition as well. Yeah? I know it's a vague answer, but it's the best one I can give. Sorry. Yeah? Okay. Can we be silent, please? Otherwise, people can't follow. Yeah? Go ahead. Yeah, well, it depends on your personal nature. A lot of people will accept that it's the boss and, well, if you can't find another job or it's difficult for you to get away, you will stay. But I can tell you as well, I've left companies because I was not in agreement with how people were working above me. And then I said, listen, this is not who I am. My norms and values are not the same as the norms and values of my boss, and therefore I'm going to leave. And I know that's not always easy, but it's also not easy if you get out of your bed. What I said, what makes your clock tick? That you get up and you are frustrated, you have no energy because you don't like to work for that shitty boss. Yeah? That's the point. Who else? You. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very tough one. I can see that that's happening. I gave the example of the Italian guy. If I would live in Italy, I would be confused all the time because people make decisions that I am not used to take. So I can completely see your point. But it's then either you accept it, but I would always advise you stick to your own moral compass and try to get away from it because it's not your world. It's not your people. Do something else. Well, I think a lot of people that sit here, I think they have many of the same things that they appreciate or not. Yeah, okay, but you come from a family. And if things are right, you have the same norms and values as your family. You've got friends. As if things are right, you have the same norms and values as your friends. That's what it is, what I'm talking about. I had some friends in the past with not the same norms and values. I thought I liked them because they were exciting and we did nasty things and stuff like that. But in the end I thought, well, it's not me, so I have to get away. So I got out of this group of people. It's your choice. Of course, yeah. Who else? Go ahead. I will walk to you. Tell me. Yeah.
Not the pressure. Have this will have points that you get when done with your boss. But this either continue with the job or resign with the job. I believe this is
If I understand you correctly, you said, I don't believe that pressure leads to fraud. That's what you're saying. What I said is that many people are in a situation of pressure, meaning that they want to have something that they don't have as we speak. And I gave the example, in the Western world, many people divorce. And then they have to sell their house because it's too expensive to keep on their own, and they can't sell. And then they have a need for money because they live in that house, they can't pay the mortgage, and then they are in the position like the guy from the pension fund. Then he says, well, actually, I can commit a bit of fraud with that building. It will bring me 2 million euros. It doesn't matter for the pension fund because they've got billions, and my problem is solved. And then it happens. Of course, if I was in this position, I would never do that, I think, I hope. Because that's another thing. You don't know, until you are in a situation you don't know. That's a big thing. So if you are, you can say now, I don't do it. But I've been honest to you today. I told you I've been in those situations a couple of times. And then I had to fight really hard with myself. Am I going to do this or not? Because it's very temptive. If somebody says, here, 5,000 euros, and you make a salary of, let's say, 2,500 euros per month, then 5,000 euros is a lot of money. So it's not easy to say, I'm not going to do it. It's easy here today amongst each other. But if you are in the situation, you don't know how you are going to act. Who else? More questions? Oh, one more. Go ahead. Yeah. Father and son's conflicts? I will tell you about myself. If you look at my upbringing, and I have a father, of course. I have also 2 brothers. And the way the relationship with my parents developed over time, and you saw it a little bit in the schedule, was basically, in the beginning, they just, you have to listen to them. They are your parents, that's what it is. And then at a certain stage you get, you become adolescent. And then are going to fight. You don't want to Yeah, listen to what your parents say. Your friends become important, other things become important, but it's certainly not your parents. You don't want to deal with them. And then over time, then you are going to study. Then, well, it's a little bit in imbalance. You don't have to do much with your parents. Maybe during the weekend you go home, or and once a month you go home and you bring your laundry and stuff like that. And for me, when I got to the age of 30, something like that, I started really talking to my parents. I normalized the relationship with them. Why? Because that was the case. And now they are more or less my friends. So I have a very open and good relationship with them. And I think that is possible. Why not? Because you are dealing with each other on the basis of equality. You are not dependent anymore of your parents. And they are not dependent of you anymore. Maybe later, when they get older, yes, but not at a certain moment in time. So I believe that the father-son conflict, yeah, it can exist, but it's also very possible that you have a very good relationship with your father. Yeah? Anybody else? It's enough? Yeah? Well, thank you very much. I was very pleased. With the interaction, and what I'm always saying, because that's important as well, I'm on a regular basis, of course, here in Russia, but also in many other countries. If you want to know more, or if you think I can help you in whatever way, I'm easy to find on the internet. Please contact me, and I will see if I can help you. Facebook, I'm also on Facebook, so that's fine. Yeah? Okay, thank you.